Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, joining you from the lands of the Insilkshan-speaking peoples of the Okanagan Nations on our small farm just outside of a small town known as Summerland, BC. First off, let me thank you so much for all the notes of condolence and the sweet feedback you've sent over the past week since my last episode about our little Missy Mona becoming an ancestor. I feel your love and your care around me. It's been so beautiful to actually feel the energy of having people gather around and grieve with me. So I appreciate that so much. I also want to thank folks who responded to my Instagram post. You might not follow me on Instagram, but if you do, you might have seen my post about how even in the face of grief, life keeps lifing. And so I made this direct ask for folks to pre-order my forthcoming book, How to Connect, because July is it's like a deadline for determining how big the initial print run should be. And so I was like, can you please just buy? Because basically the people I know are most likely to buy. And once I kind of get a sense of who has already purchased, then I will be able to help discern how much should we invest in inventory. So it's like a big financial risk. And so I just want to say, wow, y'all really came through. I see you. I see your names. Your pre-orders are really helping. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart, just so genuinely. Thank you so much for your support. And so now let me offer something back in the form of a great conversation that hopefully will leave you feeling more educated, more informed, more empowered, more knowledgeable, more of a source for others to come to, like a resource in your community for folks you know who might be going through the menopausal transition. Yes, I'm back on it. Perimenopause. Can't stop, won't stop. It's not a trend. It's a rite of passage. Thank goodness everybody's talking about it now. So let's get into it. My guest today is Lasara Firefox Allen, author of Genderqueer, Menopause. She also wrote a book, in case this name is kind of like tweaking something for you, many years ago. I don't know how old it is, 12 years old, maybe old. I should have looked this up. Anyway, she wrote a book that's something of a classic amongst witches, feminists. It's called Jailbreaking the Goddess. Stay tuned till the end of this episode to hear what else is coming from Lasara, kind of along similar lines. Sort of ties her first two books together in a way. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Lasara Firefox Allen is a master of social work. They are an author, educator, certified menopause doula, and a coach specializing in gender-affirming menopause care. So they train healthcare providers, therapists, coaches, and other allied professionals. I guess that's me. I consider myself an allied professional to deliver inclusive, trauma-informed menopause care for people of all genders. And I just want to flag, this is in the show notes, but I just want to heads up, Lasara's next Gender-Affirming Menopause Care certification course is starting in November 2026. So check the show notes if that piques your interest. I am so happy to welcome to the show Lasara Firefox Allen. So Lasara, what identities do you lead with?
That is a beautiful and complex question for me. I lead currently with the identities of being genderqueer and just queer in general. But the most, I would say the most resonant and forward-facing identity that I lead with is curiosity. So I'm never at the end of my gender journey or my sexuality journey or my journey of self. I'm always evolving, and I just turned 55 and have come to a clear understanding that for me, I don't even want or desire an end point for that.
I love that. I love that. I'm so delighted to have you here to talk about your book, Genderqueer Menopause, Navigating Menopause for Trans, Gender Nonconforming, Gender Fluid, and Other Queer-Bodied Folks. So somebody on Instagram, a mutual, was like, hey, I think you should read this book. I think you should interview her. I was like, great. I actually just bought it. I don't even think I went to your publisher. I was just like, I'm just gonna buy it and go through. And then figured out how to get to you. And I love this book because I'm a pretty vanilla, cis, straight, het, I'm a white settler lady who's 50, pretty normy, I would say. A muggle, if you will. I don't know. I never read Harry Potter, but whatever. You know what I mean. But I'm
I don't
reading
buy
it.
it.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you. But I'm reading it and I'm like, oh yeah, all of this. This is all me. This is all me. And it makes sense to me that of course, genderqueer menopause, that would be a thing. But for like normies like me, um, why, beyond just I conceptually understand, but I would like to hear in your words granularly, why is it important to have a book about like that centers the gender expansive experience?
Yeah, definitely. So that's one of my favorite questions to answer. So basically, my reason for that is because as a gender expansive person myself, and I've been gender expansive my whole life, as a little child, I would fluctuate between like wearing outrageous dress up, prom dresses to wearing like button downs and full ties and newsboy caps and that was just like that's just an example, but that was an example of my flexibility around gender. Like I never felt at home in gender, and so for me finding my way to the different stations along my gender journey has been an interesting and complex time. And so like I've been all over the map. Like there have been times where I've been extremely femme presenting. There are times that I've been extremely masc presenting. Currently I reside as much as I possibly can in a very androgynous kind of meta gender space. And I love the concept of meta gender because it's just like, let's just shift up an octave and see if we can hang out where it doesn't really, have as much impact to be deciding what gender we are every minute, or that we can be all of them at once, even. And so while I use they, them pronouns currently primarily, I'm also like not, offended if people use other gender pronouns for me because I know that I present, people perceive me as looking femme because of cultural standards, right? So, but all that to say, I am gender expansive and I have had the experience as a gender expansive person also of raising a gender expansive child. So my younger child is gender expansive as well, trans identified and non-binary. When they came out as trans, they were 13 and they came out as trans masc. And so I started advocating for them in medicalized settings. And then as I started realizing that my gender journey was evolving in perimenopause, I started seeking care and I was using they, them pronouns pretty much exclusively. I'd go into my OBGYN office and I'd say, I'm gender expansive. I use they, them pronouns. And they would like, their face would just gloss over,
Mm-hmm.
no recognition, nowhere to find purchase. I was living in rural Northern California at the time, and a lot of people don't know, but there's a lot of rural California, and it's a lot like the rest of rural America. And so there wasn't anywhere to find purchase in my experience of menopause around integrating the gender journey component of it, which may not seem like a big deal, but it actually is a big deal because when we're talking about reproductive systems, when we're talking about, it's the most highly gendered component of our care, right? And not only that, but and as you know now, because you've read the book, like there are distinct ways in which the gender expansive experience of menopause is radically different from the cis experience of menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way that my providers could have known that a decade and a half ago. Like they couldn't have known that because the research wasn't out there, the information wasn't out there. More than half of the 90% of the research in the book that, in genderqueer menopause was drawn from studies on cis women. And in the last year, there have been a couple of studies that have come out for our specific population. We're understudied, we're undersupported, we don't have a lot of resources. So this was my attempt at filling a gap that I saw before me. When I started teaching myself about menopause so that I could advocate for my own care, I had to do a lot of like translating. I'd hear the words come into my ear and I would translate women to people. And I thought, I'm not the only one that is having this complex relationship with menopause. There are others that need this work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's so interesting you bring up the experience of advocating for your child. Similarly, my 22-year-old, when they were 14, said, I'm a boy. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what? This now? We just did all the autism stuff. Like I was just sort of
Mm-hmm.
like,
Interesting you'd mention both because
right?
there is an incredible Venn diagram there.
Absolutely. It's kind of like if you are autistic and gender expansive, tell me about your poor digestion. Like
Exactly. That is it. The trilogy there. 100%.
yeah, which autoimmune disorders have you been diagnosed with? Anyway,
Right, right.
but that recognizing the amount of harm, pain, and trauma that my child
Mm-hmm.
has experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and how much they just have decided it's actually just easier to go and use my dead name. It's actually just easier to go and because it's been so
Mm-hmm.
intrusive. And so that was 10 years ago now. Now at 22, we have new small town, new doctor who is totally, and the receptionist, everyone, if I use their dead name, they're like, who? Because it's all in the file, right?
That's
And so,
amazing.
yeah, what a difference a decade makes. But
Absolutely.
that skill of self-advocacy is a thread that goes through
Mm-hmm.
your book that I love that you are sort of crediting having to do that for your child kind of
Mm-hmm.
was like a pathway to your own. And as you say, that there are very marked differences for genderqueer folks and different issues, right? Like some people
Mm-hmm.
stopping bleeding, they're just like, yes, can't wait for it. Other people can feel grief. There's no, there's the whole expansion there. And there's a lot of research now about neurodiverse folks, neurodivergent folks, also experiencing like different symptoms, and
Yes.
so you do talk about this. Do you want to share a
Yeah.
little bit more about some of those marked differences that you want to highlight
Yeah.
between, if you're gender fluid, if you're neurodivergent, these are some symptoms that,
Yeah.
may not be as acknowledged or put into a different basket because of those identities. And so you're not getting the like maybe you're perimenopausal question. Yeah.
Right. Well, and interesting that you would bring that one up because, the fact of the matter is that with gender expansive folks, and I've been trying to like, this is one of my sort of like, if people take one thing away from the podcast, this is one of them, that I want folks who are gender expansive who are 22 to be reading this book. I want folks who are 17 to be reading this book because if you are gender expansive and you are considering any kind of gender affirming intervention, whether it's chemical or surgical, this is information that you need to have on board before you can make an informed decision. And so I think we're at such a precarious place with trans healthcare, honestly, obviously, in so many different ways right now, because trans healthcare is under attack,
Mm-hmm.
ongoingly. And that brings different odds to the table, where if you're thinking about getting a surgical intervention, there are things to take into account that maybe we didn't necessarily need to take into account as severely at 5 years ago. But even at that, like, and point blank, I want to say anyone should have access to any surgery that will improve their quality of life. And that's what we're talking about, right? Right. In the case of surgical intervention, like a hysterectomy, we're talking about a life-saving surgery. That said, our community needs an opportunity for fully informed consent. And getting that informed consent means getting information like this book into the hands of people that are looking at that surgical intervention. Because they need to be able to make the decision whether they want to retain an ovary, retain two ovaries, whether they want to have everything taken out. And the only way to make that decision is to know what's on the other side of that surgery.
Absolutely. In the Numinous Network, we have a sensitive systems group, which basically means, hey, is your nervous system sensitive for any reason? Welcome.
Right.
And so having tracked the journey of someone who experienced surgical menopause after cancer, but having had, endometriosis and all of that, I was stunned that the oncologist doesn't mention it. Like nobody's kind of mentioning what's your aftercare. They're just kind of like, and then you will be in menopause in like the next day. What?
Right.
And we no, that's a whole different wing of the hospital. We haven't set you up with anyone. What?
Right.
And so that level of detail in your book was really helpful about, I don't really know how to pronounce the names, but it's like you're going to retain the one ovary and here's how what you might experience. Like these are wild experiences when it's happening gradually and unbeknownst to you, but imagine waking up the next day and just being like, wow, my whole personality schedule is
literally you're premenopausal at 10 a.m. and you're postmenopausal by noon. I mean, literally there's no window. So one of the things that I really am advocating for in general is the idea that surgeons as lead up care to gender affirming surgeries, in this case, especially hysterectomy, that like a family history of menopause be taken. That, we know what this person might be expecting based on their family history, so that we can give them the resources that they need in advance of a crisis, right? It doesn't need to get to a crisis point if we know what to expect.
100%.
And so that's one of the things. So that's one area where gender expansive menopause can be radically different, right? It can happen at 17, it can happen at 19, it can happen at 25, it can happen at 30. It can happen anywhere in the trajectory, if a person opts for a surgical intervention. Or not, right? If they retain their ovaries, then it doesn't have to happen at that point. And still, there are other indicators like that if you retain one ovary, then you're likely to have an earlier onset of perimenopause and menopause than if you retain both ovaries. If you retain one ovary, this is the point number 2 about what makes gender expansive menopause different. Gender expansive folks can experience menopause or menopause-like experiences more than once in our gender trajectory. So if someone goes on high-dose testosterone, right? And I witnessed this with my younger kid when they went on testosterone at 17, they went on testosterone. And looking back, I was like, oh my God, like, honestly, like it did not occur to me then because I hadn't been through menopause yet. But looking back, I was like, that was an analogous experience to menopause. The irritability, the rage, the, heightened emotions, the night sweats, the hair loss, like, like, such a whole thing, like, and then if someone, once one stabilizes on the testosterone, some of those symptoms will go away, maybe all of them will go away, but you're still dealing with a postmenopausal body. You can still develop genital atrophy, right? You can still experience genitourinary syndrome of menopause, and a lot of people do who are on high dose testosterone, right? So and that needs to be treated in the same way that it would be treated in a postmenopausal body. So that is with, topical
Mhm.
application of estrogen, right? So that's another area. Then if you go off the testosterone for whatever reason, your body is
Right.
going to go through a homeostasis period again while you get back toward potentially menstruating again, potentially, depending on what plumbing you still have, right?
Hmm.
Whatever that might look like. Um, so there are a lot of different ways that we can experience menopause or menopause-like experiences with the retention of one ovary. And I
Hmm.
talk about this in the book. There's no research on this. Everything is anecdotal. There's
Hmm.
literally zero research out there on this topic. I had to go deep into the subreddits to find out the information that I found out in, basically space that's only frequented by, FTEM trans folks.
Hmm.
And the reason I did this was because my younger kid at 25, 24, at 24 got a hysterectomy with
Hmm.
with a unilateral oophorectomy. So they had one ovary remaining. They went through what looked like menopause. And you never know if that one ovary is going to retain its ability to produce hormones. Like it can have a surgical shock to the point that it just says, no, thank you. Like it
Hmm.
can, that can happen. It's rare, but it can happen. While my younger kid's body was trying to decide whether that ovary was going to take on the job of producing enough hormones for a body to be,
Hmm.
regulated, they had another experience that was just really intensely menopausal. And it went on for about 10 months. And they,
Hmm.
they called it their angry cactus stage of recovery.
Right,
But
right. Yeah.
it was like, it was such an intense time. And I had been through menopause at that point. So I was like, okay, now I know what's going on. So that's what led me down
Hmm.
this rabbit hole of like, what is this a real thing? Do other people experience this? Yes, other people do experience this.
Hmm.
Why didn't the surgeon talk about it? They probably don't know.
They don't
Um,
know. They don't know. And it's so fascinating, the stuff we learn. So I'm thinking about when my kid 10 years ago was we were sort of like in the okay, well, let's start with like social transition and see how this goes. And I was attending a parents of trans kids group, and I felt so badly for the parents in the support group and their kids, because it was like, oh, my kid's gone through the surgery, and they don't their mental health is worse, if not better. And at the
yeah.
time, I was like, oh, so that makes me afraid. And but also now, having gone through perimenopause and seeing that, like,
Hmm.
there's the physical stuff, but there's the emotional and psychological stuff that your primary care provider does not know about. I
Right.
almost would guarantee they do not know about,
No.
and they will want to put you, rather than saying like, hey, maybe we should look at some like hormone support, they will say we need to put you on antipsychotics or whatever. And I don't
Right.
have anything against
Antidepressants or
yeah,
yeah.
antidepressants.
Yeah.
I don't have anything against medication, but
Hmm.
if it's the hormonal support that would have been helpful for those
Right.
poor kids and young people who've just transitioned, hoping all some of their dreams or some of their like that sense of being
Hmm.
able to feel at home and belonging, but then you have this heightened acute sense of alienation from the
Hmm.
world, from your life, from your identity. That alienation is sort of a undercurrent of
Yeah.
perimenopause,
Yeah.
is very not talked about very often. And one of the
It's
things we
not.
now
Yeah.
know is, like, if you experience depression or anxiety, you talked about the family history. It's like, okay, and also your psychiatric and psychological history, because if you experienced any major depressive
Absolutely.
episode in your life, you're now 13 times more likely to re-experience it in perimenopause. Gosh, would have loved it if somebody told
And
me that.
and even beyond that, that's so important. Thank you for bringing that up. Even beyond that, folks who have never had a history of mental health issues have a higher chance of developing mental health considerations during perimenopause than
Hmm.
folks who are not in perimenopause. I don't know the statistic exactly, but I do
Uh,
know that it is the highest rate of suicide
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
in,
about 4 times more. If you've never
right,
had a psychiatric history, any major depressive episode,
right,
there's still 4 times more likely to develop it in perimenopause stage than folks who are not in perimenopause. So
right,
yeah, this it's like, and again, not saying, well, I'm not taking anything away from taking antidepressants or anti-anxiety, but that's
right,
not it. But it's like, if ultimately at the root of it, like a little estrogen, tiny little estrogen was going to go a long
right,
way, like, please, oh my God, give it to me. And I do feel
right.
badly for all the folks who are gender expansive, who then, in where I live in British Columbia, hormones are now covered by the government. So I can get my menopausal hormone therapy for free. And, here's my trans identified, non-binary identified friend going,
Hmm.
oh, you get, I'm sorry, you're what? Isn't that gender
Right,
affirming care that you're getting for
right,
free? And
right,
it's like, yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, it's, a few months old. It's a new thing. But if we know that that's going to help our immune system, it's going to help our mental health, it's going to help our, just everything, cardiovascular, all of it.
All of it.
It's so frustrating that there are these additional barriers and just pure lack of knowledge in the medical system.
Yes.
So it absolutely makes sense that this book is so vital. And you do a great job of also, you talk about neuroqueer theory in it, you talk about
Hmm.
disability, you also talk a lot about self-advocacy, and I want to get to that in a
Hmm.
moment. But
Hmm.
we just kind of did a quick deep dive here into the
I
medical stuff,
know.
and I just want to
Just went
kind of
straight
like
in.
flag this for anybody listening who provides therapeutic help or is a healthcare provider working. I mean, every healthcare provider is working with uh, gender expansive folks, whether they know it or not, right? Or care to
Yep.
know about it or not. Um,
Yes.
and you do a lot of self-advocacy suggestions and exercises in the book, but you also have a great appendix for people who are healthcare providers. Um,
Yes.
can you talk about, like, how are you holding the healthcare providers in mind as you wrote this book?
Definitely. I love that question. And I have 2 points to get back to after we talk about this, which is one is gender affirming care you mentioned. Gender affirming care is for everyone. And the travesty is that straight cis folks can access gender affirming care with zero effort,
Mm-hmm.
and trans folks cannot access it,
Yeah.
in many cases without incredible amounts of red tape.
Yeah.
So every person above a certain age, or even some who are, every cis straight person above a certain age is accessing gender affirming care.
Mhm.
I like to use the example of Elon Musk.
Please do.
Need I say more? But hair plugs, jaw
Yep.
work,
Yeah.
all of that is gender affirming care.
Yeah.
Testosterone injections, gender affirming care.
Yeah.
Um, all of this, right, is gender affirming care. So like a cis straight man can access gender affirming care with no effort, um, and no question
Yeah.
asked.
Mhm.
Cis straight women can access gender affirming care and are sold gender affirming care. Like the
Yeah.
whole marketing of menopause is marketed as gender affirming care. It's like,
Hmm.
don't lose your femininity, don't lose
Totally.
your, like, don't
Hmm.
lose access to your feminine,
Hmm.
blah blah blah. That's like everything's Pepto Pink. That it's the whole thing, right? It's the whole thing. So like that is just, I'm glad you brought it up. It's like one of my major soapbox issues. Like gender affirming care is for everybody, and it would be great if we could get to the point where trans folks could access it as
Hmm.
easily and with as much respect and space given as cis
Hmm.
straight folks do. And then
Hmm.
the other thing is that hormones have no gender. You were talking about the kids post surgery, post
Yeah.
surgical intervention, the young folks post surgical intervention needing more support. One of the reasons they're not getting the medical support that they need is because I think we in the US at least, I don't know about Canada, but in the US at least, we have this incredibly binarist view of the hormones. So, you know, estrogen is for girls and testosterone is for boys, and never the two shall meet. And that is not actually how our bodies work. All bodies have all sex hormones to different degrees and levels, and we don't know what our levels were pre-decline. None of us know. None of us have a baseline. And not only that, for some of us, it's not about getting back to our baseline. If we had PMDD, if we had PMS, if we had like things that didn't work out so well for us with estrogen, we don't want to get back to that baseline. We want to find a new normal that works for us, right? So once we break away from that really extreme binarist view of hormonal sort of regulation, I think we'll all be a lot more free to get the right kinds of care for our bodies and psyches. So for the healthcare providers, I was writing I've always kept the healthcare providers in mind, just because like the part of writing the book, the impetus was like, I couldn't get the care that I needed. And I wanted folks in my community to have access to the care that would serve them. And that was, like spurred on by the fact that I didn't have access to the medical providers who had the information that would have benefited me. So I kept healthcare providers in mind the whole time. And I've also worked, I'm a certified menopause doula. I'm a menopause coach. I am an accredited menopause educator. I've done my work to get to the point where I have a pretty thorough understanding of the terrain. And through that time, I've kept in touch with medical providers who've helped me with that process, read my materials, kept me accountable. Like we have a back and forth relationship, what works, what doesn't. I'm constantly learning from the medical community, and I respect the work that's being done there. I've done presentations at different medical conferences. It's an incredible space to be in. And all of that said, when I was writing the chapter on advocacy in the book, right? So there's a chapter dedicated to self-advocacy in the book. I found myself getting like fired up, just angry, to be frank. And I found myself getting like really just like pretty heartbroken, honestly, that I felt the need to like basically arm my community against the medical establishment, so that they would be able to sort of head off the, of course, trauma to come. And so I let that, I was sitting with that, and I was like, what I want to be doing is enacting upstream change. I want to be enacting upstream change. So I developed a provider course on gender affirming care, and it's an 8-week course. It's intensive, it's interactive. It's you can either do it in person, not in person, but online on Zoom, in person, real time as a collective cohort, or you can do it asynchronously. I've had people from all around the world participate. So folks in other time zones may do it asynchronously. Some people actually wake up to take the course and do it live because it is so invigorating. It's a small course, small cohort. I keep it that way on purpose because we go deep and we cover everything from A to Z, including we do an audit of materials. So, we talk about training our staff. We talk about everything from, what the front of your venue looks like and whether it's safe for you to display a pride flag or not. Right. Some folks are not going to feel comfortable walking into a space that displays a trans pride flag on the door because they don't want to be clocked. So like we need to think about like, is this a safe community for me to be having pride insignia on my outfacing, presentation? And also we talk about the difference between like performative allyship and actually changing our structural care models. It's rooted in trauma-informed care. It's rooted in learning how to be conversational and collaborative with our client base or our patients. And I train everyone from, I have doctors, nurse practitioners, midwives, coaches, yoga instructors, public health officials. I've trained people across the gamut. So it's amazing. It's like the only thing like it out there that I know about. And it's an opportunity to go from feeling unsure to feeling like you have somewhere to stand and to move from, right? And so, and it's a certification course. It's an accredited certification course for providers. So
Fantastic. We'll definitely make sure that that is in the show notes. It's happening November 2026. I also, so, you know, that aspect of working, providing information for healthcare providers is an aspect of your book. It's a thread throughout, but it's not the main thing. I want people to hear how granular your book is. I love it because I get on my soapbox about GSM, genitourinary syndrome of menopause, because that was one of the things that was like, I got all the ointments. I got it. I'm just going to be very frank here. Well, frank enough that I won't make people uncomfortable if they're like riding in the car with their kid, but like my lady bits were so chafed for so
yeah,
long. And I'm still pissed at how many people saw my pussy and didn't say, oh, yeah, the skin's a little papery. It's not as pink
yep,
as it used to be. It would make sense to me that it's very sensitive. You should get some hyaluronic acid cream on it and some topical estrogen. The fact that we now know, and I know
yep,
this is like very recent research and like it takes a while to get it, but come on. I had a colposcopy for God's sakes. And I was like, yeah, can I have more lube? Cause this is, so many people saw it. I went for so many things, but it's like, if you have an itchy sore, if your vulva, if your mons, if anything is just like sore, and I would tell my provider, I was like, my vagina feels like an old leather boot. Like, please
yeah,
help me, like, help me. And they didn't. And we know that anyone who's going to experience perimenopause, a decline in estrogen, is going to experience some degree of genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which is basically, it used to be called vaginal atrophy or something like that. But
which
basically, it's
is,
dry and it hurts.
yeah, I'm glad that the name is changed. And, thankfully, I learned about the name shift before the book came out so that I could shift it so that, because GSM is a so much more accurate term than vaginal atrophy.
Yeah.
Vaginal atrophy, and I use the term genital atrophy because a lot of the folks in
Yeah.
my community don't necessarily relate to the term vagina. Also, vagina means sheath for a sword, which
Right.
is like
We're
so
over it.
wild.
Yeah.
We don't like the word.
No.
So so I say, topical application of estrogen, genital application of estrogen, um, just to be inclusive. And so the things to be aware of about GSM, right, is that it's not just the dryness and the propensity to tear, it's also urinary issues, yeast issues. If you have BV, it's an
Mhm.
increase in BV. It's like
Mhm.
all of those things together. And the amazing, miraculous thing is that the treatment that you're talking about, like a little bit of hyaluronic acid and a nice dose of estrogen every day for a while, and then every few days as you get, more saturated,
Mhm.
is going to take care of like most, if not all, of those issues.
Yeah, yeah. And like there's serious issues when it wasn't just that it got in the way of sex, right? That it's like I feel like I have
Right,
an anal fissure. I feel like I there's a tear.
right,
I'd be like, "Can you see it?" Like cuz I couldn't see it, but I'm like
right,
there's something, it hurts. But I've heard from people who are like, "No, like I can't wear jeans. No, like
right,
I can't sit down on a surface unless I have
right,
kind of like I'll sit on my
right,
sweater in a certain kind of way so that it's like a donut, you know?"
right.
Like, and sometimes it's not localized. It's just like an ache.
Yeah,
It's like an ache all over. So you
yeah,
have like resource, even, okay, this is what I love. This is how, dear listeners, this is how granular Lasara's book is. it isn't just, oh, you need lube, make sure that you're using lube. You need the proper osmolality in lube. When I saw that, I was like, this person definitely has done her research or their research, because this is like the fluid level in these cells. A whole bunch of lube is worsening our genital urinary syndrome of menopause. What did you
Right.
discover? Like, because of course we think, yeah, just slap some more lube on it, and some of it is drying us out.
Yes. So the wrong osmolality levels will actually cause your tissues to have the fluid drawn out of them instead of drawn into them. So you want the kinds of lube that are pH balanced and osmolality safe. So and I offer some different listings in the book, but there are a lot of different places you can go for that information. But just know that a lot of the ones that you can get in the hygiene section at your local Walmart or whatever are not it.
Yeah.
They're not the
The
right
ones you've
one.
heard of, you don't want them.
They're
The
not the
ones
right
you've heard
one.
of, you don't want them. And I'm not getting paid for this. I wish they would pay me, but Good Clean Love is available in
Mhm.
most pharmacies in British Columbia anyway. But I had to go online and like look up what is the
Yeah.
osmolality of. And
Yep.
there's articles, people can find more, but
Yeah. And
yeah.
there's another brand called, I think it's called Wet. Like there are a number of
Yes.
different brands that are really, really good and that are clean, you know, and delightful to
Mm-hmm.
use. So
Mm-hmm.
just find a lube that you like that is safe for your genitals.
Yeah, yeah. You
Because
would
if you
think that
don't
they
like it,
want.
you aren't going to use it, you know.
No, exactly. And we had to go through a few. Some of the aloe vera ones, it's like, wow, it's sticky and now it's gone. Like it is a little bit
Right,
more like
right,
a moisturizer kind of
right,
thing than a real good lube. So it depends. I
right.
mean, maybe that depends on the kind of sex you're having too. But
Well, and
we
some
found we had to go through
silicone.
a few.
Absolutely. And some silicone lubes are safer for some folks, like depending on what kind of toys you're using. You don't want to use a silicone lube with a silicone toy because it can cause the toy to break down.
Mhm.
But if you're using toys, you want to be using a water-based lube.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, all of this is in there. All of this is in the book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all in there. It's so fantastic. And then you actually move us through to like post menopause. Like you
Hmm.
take us through the years. Like, okay, so now you're 4 years past. Now you're 16 years past. And I think you even phrase it sort of like this. It's like, as with so many things in life, one of the greatest protective factors we can have is a social life, a social
Yes.
network. And you really advocate for intergenerational friendships, which I 1,000% absolutely want to like shout this from the rafters. Like, we should be friends with younger people and older people. And as a person who has been yearning to turn 50 since I was 30 and like could not wait to turn silver and all that. Here I am at 50 being like, this isn't even that old. Like I don't actually,
Right.
like
Right.
it's like I want more old in my life. Now I live with my
Right.
in-laws, and so I have more access to that. My mother-in-law's in her 80s. So I have a bit more of that, but this sense of the social network and having quite a diverse group as a protective factor. What in some of your research and experience led you to feel that you wanted to include that in your book?
Well, some of it's just common sense. Like as we get older, for one thing, right? If we want to stay active, if we prioritize being active and engaged, then having younger folks in our lives is really helpful because, as I said in the book, like those are the friends that are going to be getting us out to go for a hike on Sunday instead of sitting and having tea.
Mhm.
That's real. Or go out dancing or and in the Bay Area, I don't know about where you are, but in the Bay Area, we actually have a lot of clubs starting earlier dance parties now for
Nice.
folks over 30, which is
That's great.
hilarious. And so I love it. I love it. Such a great thing to have access to that because I love getting out on the dance floor and shaking it. So that's going to be great for that. And like one of the examples that I use is a pilot program that was used in a housing model that was a co-mentorship model. That is a co-mentorship relationship, which is basically a relationship of equals rather than a hierarchical relationship, where an older person and a younger person are paired together and they are learning from each other. So maybe the older person is teaching storytelling and the younger person is teaching, tech literacy. Or maybe the older person is teaching, you know, poetry appreciation, and the younger person is teaching, you know, play golf, who
Yeah,
knows,
exactly.
whatever it
Yeah.
might be,
Yeah.
and it's not always like, diametrically opposed, but like you have the opportunity to be increasing the flexibility of your mind. And for the younger people, like this, especially in queer culture, I want to say, as a person who grew up in the advent of HIV/AIDS and lived through the AIDS crisis in the Bay Area, ground zero, I lost my first person to AIDS when I was in my teens. And I was I was actually a hospice worker for people in late stage AIDS in my late teens, early 20s. And it was an amazing and heartbreaking experience. I carry their stories with me to this day. And we lost a whole generation of elders. So as a queer person growing up in a queer community, like we did not, our lineage is broken, right? Not that there's no one, but even folks who are my age, like there are fewer of us than there would have been. Right. And so like cherishing our relationships with our elders is very acute for me. And I want to say too that in the queer community, like I don't party anymore. I'm 5 years sober yesterday. So
Oh, congratulations. Well done.
I still go out and have fun, but I don't drink. So, but when I was still drinking, I would go out clubbing, and I remember going out. I was in my 40s. I was in perimenopause, definitely. I was in my 40s. I was at a pride post party, a post pride like after party. And I was there with a couple friends and we were hanging out, and I went outside to just get some air. It was really hot and muggy. I went outside to get some air. I was sitting like just by myself, and a younger person walked up to me. We didn't exchange names or anything. They walked up to me and they said, "I'm so glad you're here." Right. And trans people die. A lot of trans people die. So we need to be there as examples for our younger folks. We need to be there as examples that it's possible to break through, that it's possible to continue growing, that it's possible to stick around. Even if it's not easy, even if it's not necessarily what we want to be doing half the time, we can stay here. We can still be here. We can still be in our bodies. We can still be alive. We can still be part of our communities. And that message is essential.
It is. If you, as your 55-year-old Lasara, had something to say to your 20-year-old or 15-year-old Lasara about genderqueer menopause, and if they had something to say to you, what would you want the two the two selves at different ends of the journey to hear?
Yeah, I think the most of the messaging, I was a very serious young person. I was an incredibly serious young person. I was an activist. I, didn't really take a lot of time to stop and smell the flowers. And I think that if I had a word of wisdom to offer my younger self, I would say, one, it's not that serious. And two, it's okay to have fun. It's okay to enjoy it, because we only have this one go round, at least in this version of our iteration of self, right? We only have this one go round. So it's okay to enjoy it.
That's beautiful. And what
Yeah.
would they say to you now, do you think?
They'd say, listen to your own advice.
Right. Because you're smart. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just I still get stuck on, like the sometimes it's hard for me to allow myself to be in the pleasure of just being here and still being around, and I definitely have more traction with that when I'm taking really good care of myself and getting as much sleep as I can and doing Pilates on a regular basis. And
Mhm.
speaking of our elders, Angela Davis, shout out to Angela Davis. I saw her speak just after the most recent, you know, presidential election. Thank goodness I saw her speak that week because
Mm.
whoa. Um, and somebody asked, like, because she's in her 80s, and they were like, how, you're up here, you're out there being an activist still, you're up here on the stage. How do you do it? And she was like, well, my wife and I have a very dedicated yoga and Pilates practice, and we
Mm.
just do it. We're on the mat multiple days a week, and we're still doing it. And I think that is something that is like really worth mentioning. Like,
Mm.
self-care is not going to save the world, but it is going to save your world.
Right, right. Well, and okay, so we've talked about some of the like physiological aspects, the emotional, the psychological. What about the spiritual dimension of
Mhm.
menopause? I'd love to hear what you're thinking about that, because of course you also you are well known in certain circles anyway for a classic book
Yeah.
called Jailbreaking the Goddess. So tell us, like, what about the spiritual dimension of menopause?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So I've had a very interesting year as far as writing goes. So I wrote jailbreaking, or I wrote Genderqueer Menopause, and that came out in January. Then during that time period, I was actually working on my next book, which the working title is Magical Menopause. It will not be that when it's published, but it is coming out next year, sometime in the summer, with Llewellyn, who published Jailbreaking. And that book is a 7-chapter initiation cycle into empowerment and the process of experiencing the menopause transition. And it is very much about using the sort of, we all know the maybe we don't all know, but if you don't know yet, the official, unofficial rallying cry of menopause is no fucks left to give.
Yeah.
Um, so it's taking that, like, I'm here for my own self, for my own pleasure. This is my moment now that I'm not responsible for children under the age of 18. I'm necessarily I'm in this space where not only can I, but I must prioritize myself, right? And so it's taking the fire of that and giving us a housing for the initiation, the naturally occurring, physiologically occurring initiation that is menopause.
We look forward to that. So good. Well, so the last question on the Numinous podcast is always the same, and I consider it a spiritual question. How are you coping with grief and rage these days, Lasara?
Writing. That's how I'm
Mm.
coping with it, honestly. Writing, for, some people like love to run, and when I'm feel capable of running, I know that feeling, like you get into the pace and you're like, woohoo, I can do anything. But I get that with writing. I actually hit runner's high. I hit flow with writing. And so it is my life raft. It's my sort of space where I can allow myself to open and flow and be sort of in divine presence, and open myself up to what wants to be said through me. And it's a very spiritual experience for me, and it's a very sort of present experience for me. So I love writing a lot, and that's a big part of how I'm dealing with, and it fires me up to offer something out into the community that may change at least someone's world, at least a little bit, make it somewhat more accessible, make the topic of menopause feel, there are a couple things that predict a better outcome with menopause. And one of them is mindfulness practice. And the other is a propensity for meaning making. So when we have the tools to create our own meaning of our own initiatory processes, then we can have better health outcomes. We can have better, like the chances of having post-traumatic growth cycles increase with meaning making and mindfulness as well. So like, just being able to offer people these little tools and say these things may improve your quality of life feels like what I want to be doing.
How lucky for us. And thank you so much for doing that. And thank you for sharing it with the world. And I will look forward to the next title when it comes out, and I will savor this one here. I've got a ton of folks who are listening can't see, but I have a ton of little book darts and little, I know exactly who I'm going to be passing this book to next. So thank you so much for writing that. And thank you for spending time on the show today, Lasara.
Thank you so much, Carmen. It's been amazing. It's been really delightful. Thank you so much for having me.
As I said at the top, please check out the show notes for the link to learn more about Lasara's Gender-Affirming Menopause Care certification course. I highly recommend you pick up this book, Genderqueer Menopause. It has so much of what I had been learning from Dr. Kristen. Many of you have probably listened to the great episode on perimenopause with Dr. Kristen Schnurr. Somewhere back in the 200s of this episode. I'll put it in the show notes. If you want a little handbook, though, of everything like zoop in one handy handbook, I just feel like Genderqueer Menopause is a really great, you know what? Have it on your shelf. You never know. You may not be the target audience necessarily. You might be like me. You might be like, I'm just a pretty vanilla lady. But you never know when someone's going to come into your life who needs it. Or somebody will be over scanning your bookshelf and ask you about it. Or again, it could be a therapeutic helper of some kind who doesn't necessarily specialize in the menopausal transition or, cycle education or whatever, but they know someone, they have a client, or maybe like someone moves into your neighborhood and you kind of feel like maybe this book, it's time for it to go into your little free library and maybe they find it, right? Who knows? Like books are out here changing lives all the time. Why not this one? But like it can't change a life if it's sitting on in a box in a warehouse, right? So basically, we got to buy books if we want a literate society. Buy them and read them. Or if not, buy them, because, I recognize that they are not always so cheap. At least circulate them through the library system. So if money's a little tight, consider going online or visiting your library and ask them to bring it in for you. Get it on the shelves. Get it on the shelves so people can see it. Of course, as I'm closing up here, if you would pre-order my book, How to Connect, I would appreciate that so much, especially if you intend to, but you haven't yet. Oh my gosh, this month, July, would be like such relief if you would. Our whole worker co-op would appreciate that. I don't know if you know that, but yes, Ninth House Press is a worker cooperative. And so we are focusing on a community-based, direct-to-consumer, no Amazon model that we feel is part of building both the present and the future world we'd like to live in together. I know, there's a whole argument here about classism and affordability, et cetera, we are doing our best to recognize that, while at the same time recognize that it is just not sustainable to keep supporting not only this, like these voraciously greedy megalomaniacs, but also a company that is absolutely siphoning off, destroying the industry that it has lived off of and grown from for these decades. Anyway, I've said it before, and I'm going to not stop saying it, even though I too recognize it's hard to rub two pennies together these days, but I would still highly recommend that you go to ninthhousepressbookstore.com. You purchase the Power Reader bundle with all 6 titles from the debut catalog from Ninth House Press, because that's how you're going to get free shipping and 15% off, plus a cute little tote. And the books are going to arrive in early November, just in time for gift giving season. So this is actually a very economical way for you to have some gifts to give people. Read them all first and then gift the ones that other people are going to love. So you can pre-order now at ninthhousepress.com or ninthhousepressbookstore.com. Anyway, as always, we're over here in the Numinous Network talking about topics like this all the time. Things like perimenopause, like community-based response to healthcare, to economics, to parenting and partnering, all this stuff, which is also a response to collapse and the atrophy of empire, right? The ins and outs and intricacies of community health and well-being come up in our live calls like every day. So you should come join us, even just for a month. Just try out a couple calls, see if you like us. We are serving up contact nutrition in every somatics class, which happens almost every day of the week. You'll be in the care of myself or someone else who's trained in dosing the field with therapeutic amounts of kind eyes, resonant vocal prosody, using mirror neurons to amplify a sense of safe touch, dropping into the group comfort of like a shared rhythm. So it's all in all, it's like the feeling of going to therapy without going to therapy, if that makes sense. So you get a sense of support and stability without being put on the spot, without any forced sharing or intimacy, definitely no surprise breakouts, and at a much, much more affordable cost than like a daily drop-in or, certainly than weekly therapy. So I feel like if you haven't tried us out in the Numinous Network, especially because you're worried that you're going to be overwhelmed in a live call, my friend, my dear listener, not the case at all. Like you could expect a very mellow, chill vibe with like 10 people or less. And mostly it's camera on or off. So you're totally good to just come and absorb the goodness through osmosis and not feel like you are under a microscope. So it's the same politics as this podcast, but a more soothing vibe, like hanging out, with like-minded others over Zoom in a really chill space. You can learn more about the Numinous Network at carmenspagnola.com. CarmenSpagnola. Until next time, take care.